My name's Alexis Wilson, mom to Emmett Wilson, who was born December 17, 2016, here in Canada. He was typically developing until 4.5, though I did notice some signs that I was concerned about. His language wasn't developing as quickly as some of his peers, but I was assured by his pediatrician that he was meeting his milestones. We did start seeing a speech and language pathologist to work on really just more language and eventually articulation. And I did feel that by his 4th birthday, he was caught up with his peers, and I felt pretty confident about that, considering I've taught kindergarten, and his 4th birthday, he would have been in junior kindergarten. So I did have a pretty good idea of the amount of language that kids that age would have. Emmett also had a lot of sensory needs. He liked to be tight. He would say, "Mommy, tight me." And he would like to go behind me on the couch to be squished. So I did bring all of this up to the pediatrician, and eventually he did get referred for an autism assessment when he was around 3.5. Now, this was the time of COVID. Actually, when he started seeing the speech pathologist was the first day of the shutdown of COVID. And she had concerns, and that led to, again, that referral for the autism assessment. But she was like, "I have concerns, but I can't see your child again." So we went for that assessment, which was online. And the doctor just said, yeah, he has sensory needs, but that in itself doesn't mean an autism diagnosis. See me back in 6 months if you still have concerns, and maybe we'll talk about ADHD. And then that's when time progressed. That was 3.5. And by the time he was 4, again, I didn't have concerns anymore. He had really matured and come into himself. We were home that year. I have another son, Blake, and Emmett would have been in JK. Blake would have still been at daycare. I'm a teacher. I would have been at school. It felt like too many places during the pandemic. So I ended up being able to teach from home, and we found a nanny who would come to our house during the day, who was really an early childhood educator, who also didn't want to go into the workplace during the pandemic. So that means there were a very limited amount of people seeing Emmett. And so few people that got to see him that last year, where he was really thriving and coming into himself. It was shortly after his 4th birthday that our nanny noticed that he was starting to lose skills. Like, he was spelling his name, he was starting to read, and she noticed like his attention wasn't quite what it was, and he was getting upset more often. She would take videos, and that's where I decided to call back that doctor who said, "See me back in 6 months if you still have concerns." Because to be honest, I didn't have concerns. I didn't call her back in 6 months. So we did, and then she referred us out to another doctor to do an ADOS, the autism diagnostic schedule, observation schedule. So that also happened online. It was 2021 by the time that happened. And meanwhile, I'm teaching online. Emmett would run into my office where I was teaching, and he'd want to climb on top of my shoulders. And I was just used to that, and also thought it was kind of just like, we're home all the time, we're squirrely. We did the ADOS also virtually, online, and Emmett played all the games. I believe like we had to pretend it was a birthday party, and let's play pirate ship. And she had me call his name, and sometimes Emmett wouldn't respond to his name as quickly, or he wouldn't want to move on from one game. So when we were done birthday party and moving on to pirate ship, he would still play birthday party, if that makes sense. So that yielded an autism diagnosis with level 2 support needs. But I didn't find that out until a month later, because she had to give the information back to our main developmental pediatrician. But in the meantime, literally 2 weeks after the ADOS, he went to bed one night. We had our nanny's sister came over with a kid that she was nannying, and all the kids were playing that day in the backyard. She brought one kid and my 2 kids, and I have videos from that day. They were singing. I remember being told that the sister was singing Let It Go from Frozen, and that Emmett really enjoyed that. And I had a big work event that I was that was the last day of the work event. So I was really focused on that, and I had a big part in it. And then that night at bedtime, I remember Emmett saying, "I have a poopy tummy ache," which is nothing he'd ever really complain about. And we put him to bed, and he came to my room that night screaming. It seemed like he was hallucinating or having some sort of night terror. I believe we talked a lot about night terrors around this time, because what he was saying didn't make sense, but it didn't seem like sleepwalking. And he said, "Mommy will help me." Like, he was in so much pain. I didn't even think about the tummy ache because it didn't seem like that. And he started slamming his head against the wall, looking at his hands like they weren't his. He seemed possessed. He seemed like a different child. I did not recognize him. Eventually he settled. I can't even remember. But the next day I do remember calling the pediatrician and mentioning that he had just had this autism assessment, which I regret doing that because, her first reaction was, "You don't get autism overnight," which, in our experience is not, he did. But also then once we got a hold of the doctor, our doctor was out of town, unfortunately, but the doctor who was working and taking her urgent cases was just like, "Oh yeah, he went for an autism assessment and he said he had a tummy ache." This is a common reaction. Kids screaming with autism have a common reaction. But again, this doctor didn't know Emmett and didn't know that this was not normal. This was not how a kid who was typically developing would behave with just a tummy ache. And if it was, he should have gone to the hospital. And again, it was still kind of prime COVID time, pre-vaccine or just early vaccine. And we were told, like, yeah, if you go to the hospital, they'll turn you away. It's not worth it. Don't go. Like, he's just screaming. Spend a lot of time outside. That's what we were told, which is ridiculous. I don't know what they would have done, and previous me wouldn't have known what to ask for. And this continued for about a week. About a week, I would consider taking him to the hospital. We didn't. He broke a window with his head. His arms were covered in bruises. My arms were covered in bruises. Actually, what was interesting, the only other people aside from the nanny and my husband and my parents who would come visit that were seeing him, he was seeing an occupational therapist and a speech pathologist. Again, the speech pathologist, we were working on articulation. So, like, excuse me, how he pronounces words. Because he had gained enough vocabulary. We weren't worried about that anymore. We just noticed, like, he had a bit of a speech impediment, and we wanted to target that so he'd be more easily understood to be able to communicate more clearly. In occupational therapy, we were working on some self-regulation, but mostly toileting and targeting that. So I remember the occupational therapist being shocked at, like, all the bruises on my arms, and like, at least those people knew him and saw him before. What a time. He like barely slept. He was up all night. We were already working on sleep before that. Like, so there were signs, but I guess no signs that were, like, totally unusual for the doctors. And it was also COVID, and I guess a lot of people were having problems at home and seeking medical answers for probably the consequences of being home for so long, prolonged home. But yeah, Emmett would just be up and screaming and breaking things and hurting himself and biting us, and it was terrible. Remember just crying on the couch while Emmett played in the backyard with my husband and parents. Anyway, Emmett then the behaviors kind of got better, and a little bit. I didn't even mention his language was gone. His language, he wasn't making sense. He was just babbling. It was like he was trying to speak, but just the words were so nonsensical. And maybe now, some of them, now that I'm used to some of the things he says, maybe I could have figured some of it out, but it was like just nonsense. Or I would catch a word every here and there, and we're really trying to decipher what he was saying. And Like, was this some code? Was there some secret message or meaning? We didn't know. This is before we knew about Gestalt language processing. This is before we knew about that he would be an AAC user. Like, our kid was talking and telling stories, jokes. He was communicating effectively as a 4.5-year-old would. So that got a little better, and his behaviors decreased, but didn't go away. And then we did see our developmental pediatrician who saw the old videos of Emmett and how he was and was like, oh, this is a true regression. Got his diagnosis of level 2 autism with level 2 support needs. But she also sent requisitions for genetic sequencing, an MRI, an EEG, but we were not rushed. Like, the MRI took months to happen. The EEG also ended up taking 2 months because there was a cancellation, so that was early. So we were waiting. We were waiting for the other shoe to drop, that this was some sort of brain injury, a stroke, a tumor, something that would really explain what happened to our child. Especially whenever I would search autism and regression, we would get that would happen before 2, and here he was, 4.5. It just didn't make sense to us. Anyway, all those tests came back normal. And over the years, he's had MRIs with and without contract, EEG, sleep, and like overnight EEG, lumbar puncture, exome sequencing, genome sequencing as part of a genetic study. We've seen neurologists, including the head of the neuroinflammatory clinic, who would refer to PANS and PANDAS, that just didn't fit our story. Endocrinologist, psychopharmacology. We've seen a lot of specialists. He did 2 years of full-time ABA, 6 hours a day, which was all paid out of pocket because our funding system is so delayed here in Ontario, Canada. He's done music therapy, trampoline therapy, which we love, speech therapy it's taken a while to find. We went through a lot of practitioners, physiotherapy, occupational therapy. We did the Safe and Sound protocol, which is like music that has relaxing tones kind of built in that you can't hear that help you regulate. We tried tuning forks. We tried horse therapy, which he wasn't allowed to come back. What else? There's another one. I can't think of it right now. The point is, like, whatever there is, we've tried it. Spiral praxis, which is like a very I don't want to say new age, but it's more like a holistic kind of matching the body, helping Emmett get a better sense of his body, because a lot of autistic kids who have difficulty community have this like dyspraxia between their body and themselves, and just like being able to control what their body does. And then nothing's really gotten him. We're back. He's now communicating sometimes with a communication device. It's very limited. He has a few things that he says. His device has 108 words on a page. He can navigate between pages, but he tends to navigate for food, or maybe he wants to watch something. But it's a start. He does use his voice to say things, but he's an unreliable speaker, meaning what he says doesn't always match what he wants to communicate. He may say peanut butter but want Nutella. He may use a gestalt. He'll say toenails if he's really upset. Lately he's been saying TV show, and that could mean anything. That means he wants something. So it can be really challenging for him to be understood and for him to communicate. And this from a kid who once like told me about a button that he was going to invent to stop COVID. So just to give you an idea of how complex his kind of communication was before and how effectively he communicated. And he's not safe. He will run onto the street if if not held onto. He's put his hand in water that was about to boil. He will take a knife and run around with it. He smashes anything with a glass frame. If the glass is out, he used to take it and dump it. Now he mostly wants to drink it, but sometimes he'll take it and dump it. He's broken many light fixtures in our house. I joked around that he was going through his Uncle Fester phase from the Addams Family. He would put a light bulb in his mouth, which I mean, Emmett 1 year ate 11 tiny Christmas lights. When I say ate, he did not swallow them, but he put them in his mouth and chewed them and like continued to do it. Because sometimes once you do something, you realize, oh, that wasn't a good idea. That didn't taste how I thought it would. But no, he sought that out. He's made a number of holes in our walls. His behavior tends to fluctuate, and we can't pinpoint it. Neither can the different therapists that we've worked with, which is really unfortunate. Oh, he's done swimming therapy too. I'm just going to throw that in there. But he also fluctuates between which behaviors. So how he self-injures and how he's aggressive, that will change. So sometimes he's biting his arm, which leaves a lot of bruises and teeth marks. Or then sometimes he's hitting his chest. Sometimes he's hitting his head with his hands or against a wall. Sometimes he bites us or pulls our hair or kicks. And like, we've been trying to analyze patterns. The amount of data I've collected is impressive, but also ridiculous. And just like we've really been trying to find antecedents, and we just can't find it. We've gone through a lot of government kind of supports. Ontario has something called the Urgent Response Service for basically kids who need urgent response who are on the autism spectrum. We've gone through that program 3 times. Then we were escalated to extensive needs. So urgent response is a short-term 3-month program. Extensive needs was a year. And he was their model kid, the first kid they were doing in our geographic area. So they consulted with Henley, who does skills-based treatment, SBT. And he was the kid that they used with the consultant. So like they were doing it to fidelity with him, and basically it got to the point Emmett was doing well, and then he got to the point he didn't want to go back there, and he was having a lot of behaviors, and they said, you know what, we're not seeing a benefit here, you should stop coming, we'll still support you, but stop coming. We got escalated to a community behavior technician who's been with us for about a year, and we're looking at options. We're looking at, do we send him for 3 months to a residential facility to help kind of figure out treatment plans, and that's just not we don't want to send him anywhere, but we're trying to do whatever we can. We've tried medications. We've tried a whole slew of medications. He's been on melatonin since the beginning, maybe even pre-regression, I can't recall, and currently he's on risperidone along with the melatonin. But we've tried a whole bunch of other like ADHD medications, and all the other ones either did nothing that we noticed or increased his maladaptive behaviors, more energetic, like climbing things, more aggression and self-injury. So, and we gave them really good shots. Anyway, we got to the point where he's now a part of a clinical trial for deep brain stimulation, aimed to support kids with autism who engage in injurious behaviors. And he's had, in November 2025, electrodes put into his brain and a little battery put into his chest. And the trial is 15 months in total. So the first 3 months was us collecting baseline data, which was actually a lot less than the data I was taking in my regular life before that. And then we're in the next phase. The next 3 months, the device is either on or off, but we don't know. And then it will be for sure off for 2 months or 2 weeks. And then it will be another 3 months where it's on or off, but we don't know. And at this point, we can't tell if it's on or off, because his behaviors are so hard to predict, and he goes through these phases. And then anyway, the last part of the trial will be 6 months where the device is for sure on, and and we can adjust the frequency to be ideal for him. So yeah, we've tried a lot of things. About a year ago, his behaviors were so bad that he got, well, it was just under a year ago that he got kicked out of his school, which is a school for kids with special needs, and they had a sensory pool, like an inclusive pool for all kinds of needs, where the instructors were occupational therapists, physiotherapists, like really highly trained swim instructors. The school has a sensory gym, a snooze alum. Now they have a ninja park. The school was also his summer camp, also his weekend respite. It was also his physiotherapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. The school was also, they did overnight respite. They were everything, and they couldn't support him anymore. And unfortunately has been turned away from a lot of community supports. We have a few really good options very close to us, but they won't take him because his support needs are so high. We heard the same from some big name ABA clinics that won't take him because they either know that if extensive needs SBT wasn't able to support him, then they won't be able to. And if they do other ABA, they need a 2-to-1 model, and they don't feel like it would be safe for other kids there. We do have some support at home that's funded. We have 18 hours a week of PSW who comes into our house, and then we top up on top of that. Just because it is hard to do anything. And make sure that he's safe while we're, let's say, cooking. But also we want to play with him. We want him engaged. We want Emmett to have every option. His receptive language is so much stronger, and it always was, but I didn't give him as much credit post-regression. He understands a lot. But imagine how hard it is to communicate that you understand something, especially when you're not given a lot of opportunities. Emmett also, he plays so differently. He's a very active kid. He loves running around, climbing, jumping. He loves playing with toys. He likes taking things apart. The joke at our house is that Blake likes building things and Emmett likes taking things apart. It's hard for Blake. His Lego collection has to stay in his bedroom, or else it's just going to be a mess on the floor. Emmett's more interested in like sweeping the Lego pieces around, dumping them over his head. It's just how he plays. So finding individuals who are interested in playing with him, how he plays is hard. And then they also forget that like he really does understand. And I think that's where the AAC has been incredible, that he's able to communicate, and people can kind of step back and question their own assumptions about him. Now, with having so many, our day-to-day has so much, our day-to-day is exhausting, especially many nights we're not sleeping and it's up, and he needs constant supervision. He runs around, and if we're not watching, it's very likely he's going to disrobe. And if he's disrobing, it's likely that he's had an accident. He's getting better at toileting, but he is not independent, and he's still wearing a brief to support that, and we're just not at the point where we can effectively support toileting. So he needs to be watched all the time, which we don't have that many eyes in our head. Anyway, the point is that we've had so many doors closed. When you say that your kid has autism, like here in Canada, we have to really fight to get that exome sequencing, because when a kid has an autism diagnosis, there's not enough of a yield on their genetic sequencing for the government to fund it because of that alone. So I had to point out similarities between Emmett and kids with Sanfilippo syndrome. To say like, oh, he does have some coarse eyebrows, let's do a deeper look, and then also talk about how some kids with Sanfilippo doesn't show up on their regular exome sequencing, and that was enough to convince the genetic counselors to get him the full exome sequencing, and nothing showed up. There was not enough yield. That said, we have a new geneticist that we've been working with who has now referred Emmett to another research study called Decoder, where they take kids where they believe there's a genetic cause for their symptoms, but one hasn't been found yet, and they do a deeper look into their the long read of their genetic code. So we're just starting that process. But what we would really, really like to do is to revive the research going into late age regression at places by like Abba Gupta at Yale, or I know Michael Ipsud was doing some. There are so many people, or there's actually not so many, I can take that back. There is a handful of people who believe that this late age regression is either something totally different from autism or is a unique subtype of autism that needs attention, and that potentially they can actually treat. And that when they've studied it, has differences in eye tracking and how the brain, which part of the brain lights up, and when they're doing MRIs, and yeah, some candidate genetic genes, some candidate genes from genetic setting is what I should say. So I hope our story will help legitimize this late age regression, that it's different, or really any I don't understand in general why it's just okay to say our children were talking and functioning safely and playing one day, and they lose those another day, and it's just a part of autism, whether it's before or after 2 years old. How can we just accept that? We can't. We already know that there's likely more than one autism. There's autisms by different genes. There's different ways to come around these behavioral observations that our kids have. But we can't just accept and say that that's just it, especially when we need our own studies, because this population is so much smaller than the rest of the autism population, that these kids get lost when you're looking at all the genes for all of autism across the spectrum. But when you're looking at regression in general, or late age regression in particular, more things are coming about. Help our kids. Shame on the DSM and ICT. Like, I get that you thought you helped us by making the spectrum. Well, you didn't, and you're making it impossible for funding. And it still has behaviors. We're still considering all of our options. We don't know what the future brings. As much as he's talking more now. He's not talking as much as he was before his regression at 4.5. He's not talking as much as he was when he was 2. He turned 9 last month in December of 2025, and we hope to help him. We hope that we can have action to help him and in his lifetime. But we know that may not be possible, but we hope that he can at least help others. We hope that our story can be a chapter amongst many stories that has a resurgence in interest in late age regression, or regression in general. Us parents should not be learning the DSM and learning on our own which treatments and tests to send our kids. It is a shot in the dark, and we will try all of them. But there are people with training who can target this and actually learn what's been happening to our children and how to help them. I refuse to have Emmett subsumed. I refuse to have him subsumed and forgotten into a spectrum that just accepts this as normal, because it is not okay. And he's in there. He needs our help. That's Emmett.